By 1995, Imran Khan had reached the absolute peak of public life. Looking at this image of him in his 1992 World Cup jersey, you see a man who had already conquered his field. This golden World Cup trophy represents the pinnacle of his athletic achievements. He delivered a historic victory to a cricket-obsessed nation, securing a level of global celebrity that few people ever experience. And as this photo shows, he successfully translated that athletic fame into high-profile philanthropy. He spent his retirement standing by the hospital beds of patients in the country's first major cancer center, which he built from scratch. He could have comfortably stayed inside that bubble of universal praise. But right outside the doors of his hospital, the country was fracturing. The mid-1990s brought severe economic crisis and systemic political corruption that was visibly hollowing out state institutions. Exiting a life of guaranteed comfort to step into the most toxic, heavily guarded arena in the country made zero sense on paper. It meant willingly trading a pristine legacy for guaranteed public attacks. Yet on April 25, 1996, he made the jump. He gathered a small group of idealists in Lahore to launch Tehreek-e-Insaf, or the Movement for Justice. He was launching a radical startup in a highly hostile market. The platform he pitched was complex. He proposed a hybrid welfare state, trying to blend the modern socio-economic safety nets of Scandinavia with the historical egalitarian ideals of Medina. To sell that vision, he had to break through an electoral market completely monopolized by multi-generational political dynasties who controlled the capital and the local patronage networks. These legacy politicians looked at his grand anti-corruption agenda and found it amusing. They saw a sports star with zero political machinery, and they dismissed him as completely irrelevant. Khan knew exactly what he was doing. He surrendered the universal adoration he enjoyed as a cricketer, fully accepting that his new product would face brutal, systemic resistance. That resistance crushed him immediately. When his new party faced its first real test in the 1997 general elections, the market delivered a harsh, empirical rejection of his ideology. Look at how this electoral map fills entirely with the solid colors of the legacy parties. Khan contested multiple constituencies across the country, and the result was absolute zero. He failed to win a single seat. The media response was swift and merciless. Newspapers and television pundits branded his party a one-man army and dismissed his political career as a total failure before it even started. The core critique was straightforward. Managing 11 men on a pristine cricket pitch required a completely different skill set than navigating the chaotic, deeply compromised realities of leading a nation of millions. The man who once commanded stadiums packed with tens of thousands of screaming fans now found himself speaking in dimly lit, half-empty campaign halls to almost no one. Any standard politician motivated by short-term power would have read the room, folded the tent, and triggered their exit strategy to salvage whatever dignity they had left. But Khan evaluated this massive deficit through a different psychological lens. He approached the political landscape with the unbending mindset of an elite athlete who expects to lose repeatedly before learning how to win. He treated the political environment not as a series of short sprints tied to election cycles, but as a grueling, multi-decade endurance sport. You can see the mechanics of that grind right here. He spent the next decade traveling down unpaved rural tracks like this one, moving from village to speak to handfuls of people without the glamour of media coverage. He deliberately ignored the short-term scoreboard. When the rallies were empty and the polls showed zero traction, he kept repeating his anti-corruption message, focusing entirely on long-term ideological conditioning. Surviving this 15-year stretch in the political wilderness didn't require clever backroom maneuvering. It required an athlete's sheer mechanical tolerance for repetitive effort, with absolutely no immediate reward. Those 15 years served a specific purpose. Khan spent that decade and a half baking his ideology into the public consciousness, prioritizing long-term belief over immediate electoral success. His real target demographic couldn't even vote yet. He was planting concepts of justice and anti-corruption in a generation of young people who were quietly coming of age while the establishment ignored them. Up top, the establishment is stuck in rapid electoral loops, trading power. Below, Khan is accumulating a massive base over a much longer timeline. As that generation reached voting age, that hidden growth suddenly materialized, dwarfing the establishment's cycles. By refusing to pivot when the numbers were low, Khan allowed a once ridiculed platform to gather enough grassroots momentum to challenge the establishment's control over the youth vote. Eventually, the political establishment stopped laughing. The legacy dynasties realized that the one-man party they had mocked for a decade had quietly gathered an uncontrollable following. Here is the result of that long-term conditioning. The isolated idealist is gone, replaced by a hardened leader commanding massive momentum in the streets. Disrupting a deeply entrenched system rarely happens on a standard election cycle. It requires a quiet, exhausting incubation period that only someone with an unbending tolerance for failure can survive. The 15 years spent on rural roads and in half-empty halls eventually translated into rallies of hundreds of thousands. This grassroots accumulation reached a scale that the traditional dynasties were no longer equipped to suppress, signaling the start of a massive shift in the national power structure.